So superheroes were no longer seen as relevant. They weren't as popular. They were going away. So what were people reading instead? A lot of kids were reading what we refer to as funny animal comics, where essentially it was the Disney comics. Again, check out my video where I do a little tribute to Carl Barks, the creator of Uncle Scrooge. But there were basically Disney comics and rip-offs of Disney comics. You can see there, Giggle comics. Those things are a dime a dozen with cartoon rabbits and squirrels and mice and whatever. Some of them, obviously better than others. If you're familiar with the Warner Brothers characters, a lot of them as well, they were in comics. Thing is, the Disney comics, obviously they were really big here, but where they have really taken off is in Europe. There is an artist who's still alive, not the one I talk about in the video. His name is Don Rosa, and he did a number of popular Donald Duck and Uncle Scrooge comics. And like I said, they're fairly popular here. But if you go to a comic book convention and he's there, like I got to meet him one time, I think I was able to walk up. I was maybe behind 3-4 people tops. It wasn't that long of a wait. However, when Don Rosa, when he goes to Europe, apparently especially Finland, the lines are out the door and around the block. You would think that, a pop star was there, and apparently they put him up in the nicest hotels. He is just, just like a huge celebrity. Like I said, in Europe, especially, Western Europe, Germany, the Scandinavian countries. So definitely much more appreciated over there than over here. I was lucky. He made a sketch for me in the book. However, if in Europe, because my cousin, I had told her, I said, yeah, we got this sketch, and if ever he goes there, there's no way he's going to be able to do a sketch. There's just way too many people in the line, and he spends hours and hours just signing autographs. Anyway, so we had the funny animal comics, were obviously very popular. There were also romance comics. Now, as far as the audience of comics, it's fluctuated and changed over the years. Again, now we're seeing a bit more of a mix of male and female readers. I think it's getting close to 50-50 again. I could be wrong about that. But certainly when I started reading comics in the late 80s, and then I continued through the early 90s, I was probably like maybe 90% male to 10% female. It wasn't that. It was somewhere around there. Definitely a big boys club for a long time. It was in the early days, but then a little bit later, around this time, post-World War II, I think it was right at a 50-50. And a lot of the comics that were popular amongst the girls were these romance comics like Teenage Brides and Flaming Love. And I just love gotta love the prose there. I saw the soul-searing passion in the eyes of my beloved. As he took the temptress, I feared in his arms. What's up with that guy? And who's the guy in the shadow? What's going on there? What's that guy doing? It's very suspicious. Anyway, so this is really popular. And again, I realize I'm kind of generalizing here when I said this is popular amongst the girls. I'm sure there were some boys who probably liked it too. Maybe they had a little sister who read it, and when their friends were over, they'd be like, stupid romance comics. And then when their friends are gone, they'd probably grab them and they'd read them like, oh my gosh, she's breaking his heart. All kinds of stuff like that. I found out the Teenage Brides, that's kind of an interesting, I don't see that being a big seller now. But anyway, I thought that was something. Archie Comics. I imagine many of you guys are familiar with the characters from Archie, from the show Riverdale, which basically takes sort of like a soap opera-ish, kind of dark take on these originally very comedic characters. This is when Archie debuted. Archie has been popular over the years. In the 1970s, I think it was at its peak popularity. I grew up reading Archie comics. I remember when I was in the hospital when I was 7 years old. I remember reading Archie comics. I remember my 6th grade teacher. He had a big box full of Archie comics for us to read when we finished our work. All kinds of talented writers and artists have worked on the various Archie comics. And his characters, the supporting characters, Betty and Veronica and Reggie, and of course, Jughead. They've updated his look in the comics over the years. But the characters are always very, they're like almost as iconic as Superman and Batman, where they're very recognizable, and you can change the sort of story that they're in, and you can change the art style, but they're always recognizable, and you always know who they are. Another genre that was really popular were Western. Western isn't a huge genre nowadays. Every now and then there'll be a movie or a TV series or something. In the 1950s, especially, Westerns, I mean, a lot of people nowadays are like, there's so many superhero movies in the theaters. But that's nothing compared to the amount of Westerns that were in the theaters in the 1950s. It was just, it was everywhere. So obviously, Western comic books are going to be popular as well. A lot of them based, you got the Lone Ranger, perhaps you've heard of him. A lot of even some, famous actors who starred in Westerns. They had comics named after them and things like that. Another one that was really popular were crime comics. These were, different publishers did it, but the most popular ones, and probably some of the highest quality ones, were from a publisher called EC Comics. That's E, not DC Comics. EC, and these comics, you need to keep in mind, there were a lot of little kids reading this, and you can see the images there. This was some pretty gruesome, pretty violent stuff. And again, it wasn't poorly made. They had some of the best artists working, and the stories often had clever twists and turns in them. There were also, and again, the most popular ones coming from EC Comics, horror comics. And you can see from the images there, again, very gruesome stuff. And, little kids were just gobbling this up. I mean, don't get me wrong, there were older readers as well. And I think that's who they were trying to appeal to. But again, they could be very gruesome. They could be very violent. All kinds of, all manner of horror and creepiness. But again, if you look at the art style and if you compare it to a lot of the art and comics around the same time, this is some of the better stuff. It's a little bit difficult for me to read some of these because they're a little overwritten. And what I mean by that is that the captions often explain what is clearly shown in the pictures, which modern comics tend to not do that because I think, just like any art form, it's evolved over time. And I think a lot of artists and writers especially have realized, let the story tell the picture. The only thing you should have in words are things that you can't capture in pictures. So, again, very popular stuff, but eventually the grown-ups and the adults are going to take note of this, and the entire country is going to lose its damn mind.